All right, hi everybody. Happy National Day. It's just been about, I think, 1.5 weeks since our National Day. Very excited to have everybody here today. We're going to talk about two things. Specifically, first we'll look at the new measures that were announced during the National Day rally. And then second, we'll look at Singapore's master plan and how to understand the master plan so that we can strategize our property investments.
All right. So why don't we kickstart? These are the three things that we're going to talk about. Of course, the first part we're going to talk about the new framework, which is the Standard Plus and Prime. That came out for BTO flats, and of course the recategorization of mature and non-mature estates. Second portion, we're going to understand a little bit about master plan and how does this fit in when you're selecting your property, whether is it for own stay or investment. This is a very important and yet fundamental element. And of course, a quick disclaimer on all our webinars. This is webinar number 1, Grayce. Is it 13 or 14?
I don't know. We need to check with Seth first. Webinar
13,
number 14.
How many more to go? Total 21.
7 more to go.
7 more. Great. Quick introduction. If this is your first time joining PropertyLimBrothers on our webinars, my name is Melvin Lim, co-founder and CEO of PropertyLimBrothers. Of course, we have PropertyLimBrothers Media that we've started since 2018. And of course, PRB Realty, we started last year. With me is Grayce today.
Okay, hi everybody. I am the Associate Listing Manager of PropertyLimBrothers. I'm also our Senior Marketing Manager, so very excited to share today's insights with you.
Right, so I believe that you have seen our home tours before. If not, please head on to our PropertyLimBrothers channel. You'll be able to see a lot of different kinds of properties in Singapore. And we also have different varying contents through our channels at NOTG as well as PRB Insights for new launches. Now, a quick introduction. PropertyLimBrothers is made up of PRB Creative Agency, which is PRB Media as well as PRB Realty. We all serve together as an entire team for our customers. All right, so let's kickstart into some of the key highlights from the National Day rally. Of course, first up will be the news that now singles, the moment you reach 35, you have, of course, the choice to go for a HDB resale property. You also now have the choice to buy 2-room flexi BTO flats in all locations. So in the past, you are only limited to non-mature estates. Right now, it's going to be all location. So I think that's like a whole new range of choices for you. Of course, personally, I was hoping that the age can actually drop down to like 30 years old or 28 years old so that, and my own so-called like opinion is that if let's say the government would allow singles to drop down to 30 years old, not to buy BTO but actually to buy resale, that will actually accelerate the speed that they can have in the market rather than waiting until 35. What do you think, Grayce?
Definitely. I think that was something that we were really looking forward to. One of the measures that we were hoping would be announced during the National Day rally. I think previously, one of our insights, real estate news episodes, we did cover the hypothetical scenarios if the age that singles can buy, the resale flats were lowered, the implications that this will have on the market. It's on one of our insights episodes. If you're interested in that, do head on to our YouTube channel. I think for this particular measure, I would say not much implication on the market. It's a little bit of a
small sweetener.
Yeah, I would say.
Yeah, not much of an impact in the sense. Okay, this of course will be a new thing right now. The classification basically happens like this. So in the past, based on the HDB housing estates, it was being classified into matured and non-mature estates, and this then allow HDB to actually categorize the BTO selection. So of course, when you want to apply for BTO in mature estates, you realize that the so-called number of applicants to the number of flats available usually is in a very high amount because a lot of people are looking forward to like the matured estate that's more prime location. Then non-matured belongs to areas like Jurong, Punggol, Tengah, Woodlands. But of course, if we have listened to what has happened in terms of explanation from our PM is that now a lot of the non-mature estates, example like Punggol, Jurong, they have already developed tremendously. So this then gave rise to the changes needed for a new categorization of flats. And of course, I think you have already seen the news. I'll just skip straight to this portion in terms of classification so that everybody is in line, and I'll summarize it for you. So basically what is going to happen is that in the past, there are only one type of flat, which is standard, and standard flats exist in mature and non-mature estates. And in terms of mature estates, usually it's very hard to get. Prime was actually introduced just a short moment ago. It's under the Prime housing scheme. And of course, this scheme, now they've renamed it to Prime rather than PLH. So the new categorization is actually this center portion, which is the plus model. And based on understanding, what is going to happen is that we will no longer talk about mature or non-matured. We'll just talk about whether are you getting a BTO that's standard, plus, or prime. And plus will likely be across all parts of Singapore, but very likely there will be those plots that is right beside the MRT station or very near to very good parts of the town. Maybe nearing to like the bus interchange, or maybe if they deem it as like this node over here, there's a lot of shopping malls or maybe like a hospital and stuff like that, they might classify them as plus. So I think a very easy classification is that if you want near MRT, you have to go for plus. Even let's say like is in Punggol or Jurong or Woodlands, if you want it to be near MRT, you want your BTO plot to be near to the transport node, it will be plus. If you're okay with taking feeder buses, it will be standard. If you want to go right into the central portion of Singapore, then it will all be prime. Yeah. Grayce, you got anything that you want to share?
Yeah, so I think the rationale for having such classifications is because the idea of mature and non-mature no longer holds true in today's real estate economy. Because Singapore is so developed, we just celebrated our 58th birthday. Even the further parts, I think that used to be termed as outskirts and all that, is no longer true. And what is actually more important, if you look at this classification, what it's telling us is that it is not about where you are, it is about how accessible you are at that location. Meaning, at that specific place, how convenient is it, to get down to the city centre, because MRTs are quite widespread. The network is built really, really well now. So it really depends whether you are actually closer to MRT. I think that is the way they are trying to classify this. Yeah.
So, of course, we're not just going to repeat to you what was being articulated during the National Day rally. What we're going to do in this webinar is that we are going to look at what will be the potential ripple effect from this into, of course, the BTO market as well as the resale market. And what does this mean? And of course, all these are based on our own opinions and ideation. So take note that for all our PLB webinars, there's a disclaimer. It's meant for educational purpose. When you want to make a property investment, do, of course, do your own homework in terms of your financial analysis, as well as ensuring that you know all the different types of policies. Now, end of the day, for today's webinar, if this is your first time joining us, you will notice that PLB webinars has no product push at the end. So we do not represent any new launch at the end. All the research do not skew towards a particular product. In the event if we are partnering with a developer, we will put the project name right at the start of the webinar title so that you're aware that we are featuring some different new launches. So of course, I'm going to kickstart this into these different articles, and I think you have already seen it. But very quickly, what is going to happen is that all parts of Singapore, you will see that even in north, northeast, west, and east, there will be standard and plus because of the very fact that plus properties will be very near to the MRT station. And let's start to look at the ripple effects. All right. Now, I'm going to come to this portion here. And let's just have a quick look at what will potentially happen. Okay, so if we were to look at standard kind of properties, standard now is the only type of BTO that allows you the shortest MOP period. All right? And for everybody to understand what does this mean is because we always talk about the fact that we have very limited time horizon for investment. Because Singapore banks, they take a cutoff age at 65 years old to minus your current age to determine the amount of loan to you. And of course, when you buy a HDB property, if you take a bank loan, it's 25 years loan tenure. You get a HDB loan, it's 30 years. You go for private properties, it's also 30 years. Now, plus, you need to stay for 10 years before you're allowed to sell. And prime, you also need to stay for 10 years before you're allowed to sell. Now, I would like to invite everybody to also plus another 4 years. Though, of course, government is doing their best to construct the properties faster, but let's just take 4 years, because in the past, during COVID season, a lot of people waited for 6 to 7 years to collect their keys. But let's just take an average of 4 years. It means that when you buy a BTO that is standard, in totality, you can only sell after 9 years. This one, you can only sell after 14 years. This one, you can only sell after 14 years. Now, let's take a hypothetical example of what will possibly happen. Now, just imagine if, let's say, Grayce, how old are you now?
I'm 26 this year.
Okay, is it okay to talk this on the live webinar?
It's fine.
Okay. So let's say somebody is 26 years old, right? And then you and your partner decided to get engaged, get a BTO, and of course, through that intermediary season, you all will do your weddings and stuff like that. So this is a BTO route. What's going to happen is that by the time you get your keys 4 years later, you are 30, and then imagine that you get a property that is right beside the MRT, you go for plus, this is 10 years. How old will you be, Grayce, by the time, if you can sell?
I'll be 40.
You'll
My
be
gosh.
Look at her expression. Okay, you'll be 40 years old, and you have waited for 14 years, and naturally, when we are from our mid-20s to 40, that is your highest earning power season, right? And it is also the period that you can take a little bit more risk. Now, when we reach towards 50, most of our customers, they will go into defensive mode. Because from 50 years old, this will be the period actually from 30 plus to 40 plus, your children are growing up. You want to save a little bit more capital for rainy days. But 50, you want to go into defensive to so-called pay down a little bit more of your mortgage, not to have so much commitment. Now, just imagine, if let's say you want to switch to a private property, if you can, by the time you finish the selling and buying, you'll be 41 years old. And of course, until 65, your loan tenure technically is shortened in the sense that you only have 24 years to loan for your loan tenure. Now, that's the first implication. Second implication is that this property right now, the moment you go for plus and prime, a lot of HDB homeowners, they actually have this intent that, hey, I will go for the BTO route, and in future, I will take my time to pay off my BTO. I will bite the bullet, get an ABSD for the private property, and I will rent out my HDB to get the rental and pay for my monthly installment. That is one strategy. Second strategy is that some couples, they actually go for the applicant as well as the occupier model. So one person will be the applicant, one person will be the occupier. They go for the BTO, and then of course after the MOP is fulfilled, they go for a private property without ABSD. Now, this now is technically not possible if you want to keep your HDB as a rental strategy. So this is not possible now. Why? Because after you fulfill that 14 years, you reach your MOP, you are not allowed to rent out. You can only rent out the rooms. And room rental, so-called like ruling is that you have to stay in it, then you can rent out your rooms. You cannot rent out your rooms and you don't stay in it. Your address on your IC must be there. If a HDB officer comes and inspect, you are not there, you'll be penalized. Now, what do you think about this, Grayce, about the part that you cannot rent out anymore?
Yeah, so I think that it's absolutely right that, you know, people are looking at, let's say if you are looking to buy and you also want to buy near MRT, there is that hope, that expectation that they do have aspirations to buy a private property in the future, and this HDB that is near the MRT they can use for higher rental, right? Yeah. So the fact that, you know, rental is not allowed, you are only able to rent out certain rooms, it will really taper, you know, what the PM calls the lottery effect, right? So many people are hoping to capitalize on HDB property, on BTOs, you know, to make a sum of money, and they are using this BTO as a strategy to move towards, you know, they want to own a private property, they have aspirations to own a private property, but they want to use this for their kind of first pot of gold mentality, right? So I think with this inability to rent out, it will disincentivize a lot of people to kind of who are looking to go for this strategy.
Yeah. So Grayce is absolutely right, because let's go back to the very first intent. Now, just imagine, let's say you're a young couple, and now you know that you have 4 choices. Now, the first choice is you can go for the standard BTO. BTO, you wait 4 years, 5 years, 26 now. By the time you're 30, you're 35, you can technically either sell your HDB, use the proceeds to upgrade to a private property, or you can keep your HDB. Whether you fully pay or don't fully pay, whether you're using an occupier applicant, it doesn't matter. But this is the only route for you to have one HDB and one condo, because you have to fulfill the MOP first. And a lot of people on the ground actually thought that you are not allowed to own a HDB and condo at the same time, but you can. But you have to start from the HDB first and fulfill the MOP. Now, at this route, what's going to happen is that here you can you can keep this HDB, you can rent it out, collect the rental, pay for your condo, all right? So a lot of existing families has already accomplished this. Now, this is the route that you can take. Now, second, of course, then you look at Plus. Plus now stretches all the way until here, until you're 40 years old, but you cannot rent out. So what are you going to do? You likely will then sell. But take note, when you sell, you have to pay back the subsidy. Now, so my question to you is, if you are getting a Plus and Prime property, if your intent is to keep your HDB and rent it out, but now you can't, then all the more, why would you want to go for Plus and Prime? Which I think a lot of young couples has already started to ponder about this. Then they will fall back on Standard. But at the same time, they will think, hey, Standard means that I cannot get a location near to the MRT. Then what is my fourth choice? My fourth choice is then resale HDB near to the MRT station, because I can immediately rent out after 5 years when I'm age 31. Then I can straight away go for renting out my HDB. I can keep my HDB, use the rental to pay for my condo, provided you have fully paid, or even if you have not fully paid, that's fine. Because the installment life is going to be quite low, or you can just nice to cover your HDB, and then of course you can move to your condo. But looking at this entire format right now, it's very clear that you only have two choices left, which is this and this. And this will work for you if your main intent is to keep your HDB and own one more condo. So if your intent is not this, then of course this is all good and fine. You can just continue to stay here, enjoy the great location, because you are not even intending to sell, not even intending to buy another property. Right. Yeah. Any thoughts about this, Grayce?
Yeah, so definitely, I think even when the prime location public housing model came out, there were many clients or many friends that still went for the prime location public housing. Their rationale is that I'm not going to sell. I'm not going to, I don't have aspirations to own a condo in the future. Actually, I love the location. I love the view. It's close to where I want to work. It's close to where I want to be. I just see as almost like my forever home, right? So if that is you, then definitely Plus and Prime, I think is suitable, because you're going to get fantastic location. Subsidies are better as well. So technically, the resale levy and all that doesn't apply to you. But in the event that you are actually thinking that, this might not be your end game, that, at some point in the future, you will be thinking about owning a private property, or you will be thinking about owning two separate assets, then perhaps it might be worthwhile to explore maybe just the standard option or the resale option. Yeah.
Great. So, of course, some people were also asking whether this new policy, Standard Plus and Prime, is going to affect the resale market or is going to affect the condo market. However, when we look at the actual years that this is going to take place, the very first Prime will actually hit the resale market in 2036. The very first set of Plus flats will hit in 2037. We are only in the year 2023 right now. We still have about 14 years to go before we can see what's going to happen in market. So it's still quite long. And of course, in 14 years' time, I don't know how old will I be. I'll be 50 plus already.
You will enjoy the Majula package.
Hey, you'll be 40 years old. In 14 years' time, you get to see the first resale happening.
No.
Okay.
I don't want that, yeah.
Okay. Anyway, this is, of course, very interesting. Anyway, Lester is going to write an article on this. Yep. Lester is from our editorial team. Head on to our new website, plbinsights.com. This is the place that we actually compile all our fantastic articles from our research writers and content writers. Now, let's have a look at this. I think our government is really very smart. Why? Because if you buy a Plus and Prime model, the next buyer that you sell to 14 years later, their income cannot cross 14,000 combined salary, which means that if we work backwards in terms of stress tests for a HDB loan or bank loan, they can only buy up to 1.1 million or 1.06. That technically caps the resale exit price of Plus and Prime properties. Now, furthermore, you also have to pay back the subsidy you took at the front, which I don't know how much is that. Maybe it's about 100,000. You have to shave off from here. But please take note. Let me just do a simple calculation for you. If let's say somebody were to look at a standard flat at about 550,000, but the Plus flat maybe is about 700,000, but because of the subsidy, it gets reduced to 600,000. Now, let's assume the subsidy is 100K. And this is the amount that you have to pay back when you sell your place 14 years later. Now, 14 years later, if you do the calculation, basically you have the 4 years here. You had a 10 years period that you are paying down your loan. What is going to happen is that in future, if let's say you can sell at $1 million, take note, the first charge is to pay off your loan, whether to the bank or to HDB. Second charge, you need to pay off your CPF. But this CPF has a component that is blowing up. It's called accrued interest. And sometimes if you are not careful, this can actually blow up to quite a fair bit because the accrued interest technically takes your cash proceed from your selling price to pay back to your own CPF. Now, of course, what is the impact of this is that you will have lesser cash proceeds at the end, which is why sometimes people adopt the different strategy. They don't use the CPF to pay for their monthly mortgage. They use cash. And they keep their CPF in their OA account to generate additional interest at 2.5% right here, and then they don't use it to pay off their loan. But anyway, that's another whole topic. So here you need to pay off your subsidy, 100,000, and your balance cash proceed based on our hypothetical example averaged out to be at about 100 to 130,000 depending on the selling price. Now this is just a base example, which then makes this cash proceed to be quite similar to this cash proceed for the standard flat as well, based on our scenarios. And I think you can look out for the article that's coming out on plbinsights.com. So, end of the day, I think once you touch Prime and Plus flats, your main intent is really not to earn from your BTO anymore. It's really for the location. It's to be near parents, near good schools, near CBD, near town zone. If you want to see more flexibility and you want to see a similar amount of cash proceeds, then I think you should go for the standard version. Anything to touch on, Grayce?
To be honest, I think this is really fair. So if you were to look at the stock that we have in the market, about 1.1 million are HDB flats. That's about 75% of our stock. And I think that it's only right that the government protects this stock from overpriced inflation. Because traditionally, I think there is I hear this narrative going around, you should buy BTO, then you can, 只有 BTO 可以赚钱的. So that's the narrative that is going around, right? But I really think that it's fair that the government is doing this because BTOs and HDB supply will be the first, housing that is affordable for Singaporeans. So to regulate the stock, to keep the pricing relatively inelastic, we call it, right? So I think that is a good move by the government, and you should not be looking at HDBs as a way to really, earn your first pot of gold anymore. Yeah, I think.
Yes. Correct. So I think in conclusion, our own observation, of course this is our own opinion, is that what's going to happen is that there's still a long way to go before we see any effect of Plus and Prime housing. But I think the immediate effect is that there could be a potential and possibility that more young couples would then start to think, hey, should I then go and hunt for resale HDB properties as near to MRT, near to shopping malls, near to transportation nodes, and I think that might fuel some level of interest in the resale market. And I don't think that the private property price market will be affected in a sense, because if you have visited our previous webinars, we talked a lot about the existing supply, and of course, of the very fact that with the ABSD now, it even make the price growth more stabilized in a sense, because a lot of foreign owners that own properties right now, they're not going to sell, they're just going to keep holding it. And let us move on to the next portion here, the URA Master Plan. Now, Grayce, take it away.
Take it away. Okay, so I think that was a little bit about the BTOs discussion. So now we'll dive into the URA Master Plan. So in terms of looking at the URA Master Plan, what we want to do is that if you are someone that is, deciding on property investment, where to buy, what to buy, this is a very good macro view that will give you some understanding, to if you want to, do your own little DIY research, detective work on the area that you're buying into, whether it's a profitable or what are some of the plans that are upcoming, then understanding the master plan will be fantastic for you. Okay, so if you were to look at the master plan, it will basically encompass the land urban planning for Singapore's future. The URA master plan is actually refreshed every 5 years. So every 5 years, we get to take a good look at, what is Singapore's plan for the future. Now,
yes, you're right. The next one is going to happen next year, 2024. The latest one was 2019.
Okay, so maybe 2024 will have to gather back here to do another, to touch base on what is the new announcements. But let's really look at, how the URA master plan can inform our property investment strategy. Okay, so we'll just be running through some factors, looking at the URA master plan. What are some things that we can consider? So first question to ask yourself, what will be the land use in front of me? So if you are buying into an area now, sometimes people, they are looking at the area, then it's like, it's greenery and block view. But I think clients nowadays, buyers, they're also very savvy. They're also, they will ask, okay, what is the master plan zoning? Because they want to know what is going to be the introduction in this space. So for example, let's just look at this project. Park Esta, this is made up of many different blocks. So let's say specifically you are looking here and you're looking at all the plots of land, right? If you were to use, let's say like Google Maps or Street Directory as a very simple rudimentary look, you will not be able to kind of find out what are the plans around this area. This is where the master plan will come in. Right, so looking at the master plan, you are able to see the different zonings of the plots of land around and maybe in front of you. So looking at the land plot in front of Park Esta, it is a reserve site, right? So there are many different, color codes. You can go take a look. It could be commercial, it could be residential. So these are all things that will inform you in terms of, what are the future developments of this area. Now, specifically looking at reserve site, what does that tell us about, Park Esta and its developments?
Yeah, so whenever you see a yellow color, it means reserve site. Then you need to ding, 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 ding. Because especially when you see a reserve site that's tucked right into the MRT. Now this is a very good indicator that this can potentially be an integrated development. That means you could have a shopping mall plus a residential component at the top. But of course, when our government classifies as reserve site, they're saying that they're reserving it for something. They're not going to tell you what it is yet. It could be something else, of course, but very likely at the way things are going, most MRT stations, if we notice, the trending is that there's going to be a combination of a shopping node as well as residential properties on top of it. Because you look at Woodley, you look at Buangkok, you look at Campus 1, which is Sengkang MRT, you look at Punggol, they do not want to waste the land that is surrounding the MRT station.
Yeah, so anytime there's like a residential kind of announcement, we will expect that, there will be a new launch coming up. Maybe a new launch, but it could also be a HDB kind of property. But anytime there are new flats, there are new developments that are coming up, we know that this is definitely something that will uplift the pricing in the area. So that's something that we want to take note of. But when it is a reserve site, especially, integrated developments, they will ask for a higher asking PSF at launch. So this will definitely, everyone else will get to enjoy this kind of price uplift. Yeah.
So this strategy basically is to look at, let's say you're contemplating to buy Park Esta, and let's say the current PSF is maybe at about $2,200, just for example, right? Then you will be thinking, hey, am I now holding the highest price PSF in this zoning within D14? But if you notice that there's going to be something that is upcoming, there are bare plots available, and this is a great location because this is considered like city fringe and is also very near to D15. Telok Kurau is just at the bottom. So then you will know that, okay, in future when this is launched, definitely in terms of the land PSF and the eventual selling price, we just need to look at example how much reserve residences is actually launched and sold at about 2006. Then if this is going to happen maybe 2 years later, likely, I don't know, maybe it'll be 2008 or maybe close to 2009. And when this is 2.8 and 2.9, what's going to happen 3 to 4 years later when the first-hand owners bought in and they want to sell? Then they will plus another $300 to exit. And if you were to enter at 2.2, this is 2.8, 2.9. The future exit price of this maybe is about 3.2. Then there's a $1,000 difference. So that's how basically we look at the price uplift.
Okay, let's also look at this other plot of land beside Park Star. So this plot of land, okay, looking at the URA Master Plan, is actually zoned as a red zone. So it's civic and community institution. So perhaps it could be any of these, you know, kind of like community, maybe a community center, maybe like a fire station. Yeah. So these are all things that some people some people they like it. Yeah, they feel that okay, it means that there could be a welfare home, there could be a community center. So this could mean that, you know, a lot of activity in the area. Some people, they are a little bit more sensitive. We have also looked at, you know, certain areas that it may potentially become like a fire station or a police station. So people that are maybe noise sensitive, they could perhaps, you know, want to avoid maybe the blocks closer to this plot of land. Yeah. So these are all things that will inform you when you are selecting your unit.
Yeah. So when you see W basically means that it's a worship zoning. So this is an existing mosque right here. There's also a fire station already existing over here already. So very likely this would not be a fire station. And of course you have 21 possibilities. And I don't know whether you guys remember what happened in, I think about 2 or 3 years back. That was in Fernville, where there was a similar red site, but it was demarcated as a funeral parlor. Then all the residents actually wrote in an appeal and said that, you know, a lot of properties are being built right here. Is it okay not to build like a funeral parlor right in between all the residential zonings and stuff like that? Yeah, so just take note that when you see a red color zone, it could be any of this, right? Okay, come, let's continue.
Yeah, so it's very interesting because you don't want to be caught by surprise, you know. Right. Yeah, so, okay, so I think questions to ask yourself is, you know, will this plot of land add or subtract value to my property? That is something to ask. And questions that you may be asking for yourself is also your view. So some people, they buy into properties because of the fantastic, beautiful view. But we all know that land is scarce in Singapore. Your view is not guaranteed forever unless it is zoned as maybe certain zoning such as educational plot. Then you know that it will be kept at 5 stories, right? So looking at this, you know, case study of botany at Dairy Farm, right?
Yes.
So there's this huge empty plot in front, and then this is the landed zone. So botany at Dairy Farm, I remember we did a new launch review episode on this, you, myself, and Yurong.
That's right.
So we were discussing, and we were also looking at stack analysis. Similarly, we used the master plan to make sense of which stack do we think we personally want to buy into. Yeah. Right. So let's take a look at the master plan.
Yeah. So maybe let me just come here a little bit. So what Grayce is referring to during the stack analysis at PLB Insights on our YouTube channel is that because there's these 5 blocks, so some people, if they, let's say they want to play safe, and let's say if they didn't study the master plan of this entire empty plot right here, because if you go there, this is entirely empty. If you buy anything that is front facing towards here, it's going to be extremely windy and it's so empty that you can overlook towards the whole chestnut so-called like landed property zoning. Yeah, but you definitely need to go and look at the master plan to see what is going to come out here, because it can potentially go up to about 20 plus 30 levels and you will block off all your views. So some people, without doing homework, they might just say that, hey, why don't I just go for the other facing towards the German European school, which probably right now is about 5 to 6 level, and I just need to buy at least 8, 10, 12 level to overlook this portion. Of course, you will also get to enjoy the greenery view right here. But what if there are certain stacks, let's say a 3 plus study layout that you like, or 4 bidder layout that you like, that is only existing at all these outer facing stacks, and you don't want to face the pool because it might be noisy, then how are you going to study this? So let's have a look.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. The assumption. Yeah, if you do not study the master plan, you'll start to make assumptions about, you know, what is upcoming in the area. Yeah. So looking specifically, just now we were here, right, zooming into botany and this empty plot of land. If you were to see, okay, the okay, so I think this is where we can also talk about this number that you see here. Yes. Okay, this is called your plot ratio.
Yeah.
Right. So plot ratio actually tells us how high the developers are able to build this building up to. So if you were to look at a plot ratio of 1.4, that means a 5-story, and this orange color is like basically residential zoning. So a 5-story residential zoning, which actually means that as long as you are level 6 and above, you will still get to enjoy the unblocked view.
Yeah.
But what this can also tell us is that if I'm fronting towards here, perhaps I have to be ready for some construction. I have to be ready for, the noise, the dust of the construction. So if I want something that, I already know is guaranteed and safe, then perhaps here. But if the specific unit type that you're looking at can only be here, then you will know which level and above I should invest to if view is a very crucial thing to me.
Yeah. So when you see 1.4, it means 5 levels. So it could be a zone that could be reserved for landed property. We are not sure. Of course, if you go to a mixed landed zone, they are all zoned at 1.4, which is why, for example, if you go to Teluk Kurau, you see landed properties, that is a mixed landed zone, but you also see boutique developments up to level 5, and the penthouse roof terrace is on level 6. So this is the plot ratio of 1.4. So very likely it will be a low-rise kind of housing here. And right in between is a school, which is also maxed at about 5 to 6 levels. So as long as you buy outward-facing stacks, looking over here, you cross level 7, level 8, you should be pretty safe. But also take note that you see this W here, it means that is a place of worship. So this is just an example of how you can look towards the entire master plan zoning. Now, if you come to 2.1, it means that you can go up to a level that is about 10 plus or 20 levels, depending on the flight zone restriction, because some areas are very close to so-called our air base or Changi Airport. Even though you have 2.1, there's another restriction called a height limit restriction. All right. Now, so of course the conclusion is that if you buy botany facing towards that direction, your view is here to stay, provided you go above 7 levels.
Yeah, I mean, you can also opt for the internal facing. Yeah, so some people, they just want to play safe, they just want a pool view, then that could be possible as well.
Right. All right, let's go to the third point.
All right, so another thing we want to look at is your market segment definition. You always hear us use these terms, OCR, RCR, CCR. Okay, so I think if you're not familiar with these terms, it basically means outside central region, rest of central region, and core central region. These are the ways that we classify, the districts. Right, so if you were to take a look at our PRB Insights Singapore district map, so we have already color-coded it. Majority of the projects or majority of the areas are actually classified as your outside central region. And then, of course, your rest of central region wraps around the city centre, the Sentosa area, as well as your D9, 10, and 11. Okay. Yeah, so I think this is also how we classify and understand. Right. One very interesting thing is that sometimes I've heard of properties that, they just cross one street to end in another district, and this affects the pricing so drastically, right? So to me, I think that this is a fun way to make sense of the landscape as well. If you are not too conscious about, the address that you're holding or the district that you're staying at, you are fine to stay in that area. You don't need that particular address. Then sometimes RCR can provide a lot of better value, I would say. Yeah,
that's right. Even like OCR areas, I mean, just for example, you study this project called the Centris. Centris is sitting right on top of Jurong West MRT station, integrated development. A lot of millionaires were created from that project because they bought, they were the first movers when it was so, the pricing was so attractive back then. And there was nothing in Jurong West at that period in time. But right now, just look at the prices, it's grown so much. And of course, that belongs to the OCR zoning. So I think one thing about OCR, and of course in terms of our master plan, is that the plan, I think, from our government is that they want to make sure that every zoning is quite well balanced, which is why they have started to build hospitals. You get Changi Hospital, you get Sengkang Hospital, you get the Woodlands is having their own hospital soon. Jurong, you already have your hospital. Yishun, you have a hospital. And of course, a lot of international schools are also relocated to the OCR zone. For example, last time there is an international school, what is that called? Real Valley. It moved to Pasir Ris.
You keep talking about it. And I keep saying overseas family
Oh yeah, overseas family school. Okay, OFS. Okay, so overseas family school was actually in River Valley. It's been relocated to Pasir Ris. It's like nobody expected it. So I think the repositioning will balance out the enclaves basically in the OCR zoning.
I mean, ACS Barker, that's a huge one, right? Not just
International.
ACS International.
It's going to relocate the Tengah,
yeah.
right?
So I think since this is a National Day kind of webinar, right? Something interesting is that I really think it's great because when you decentralize schools and you introduce this kind of schemes, you really it sends a clear message that you are not trying to have any like enclaves in Singapore, right? You want to balance out, you know, the community nodes. You want to balance out the schools, even the more prestigious schools. You are bringing it to new towns. So it is not just a geographical move, it's also a very social, political kind of move, right?
Yes.
It's a message that, you know, we don't want any kinds of enclaves. We want, you know, fair government systems, and we want accessibility and good education systems for all.
Yeah. So you have a mixture of local expats, different races, different income groups along different areas. So I think that's a plan that Singapore has always have in the past. So you can also look at this in terms of regions for clearer segregation. So you have the East region, Northeast, Northwest, and then Central region, which then further help us to classify in terms of OCR. Basically, OCR comprised of West, North, Northeast, and of course a part of East. And when you come to CCR, basically CCR is 9, 10, 11, as well as the downtown core plus Sentosa zoning.
All right, looking at the URA Master Plan, of course, you know, we have this thing called the Moat analysis, right? It's one of our proprietary tech tools, but within Moat analysis, there are many different factors to help us understand a property's price appreciation potential. Now, one of the factors we talk about is the MRT effect. Now, we always love to talk about this case study. What project is it?
Which is that?
The one we wrote an article on Junwei's.
Key residences.
Yes. Okay,
Yeah.
so basically the developers released the pricing, and then shortly later the MRT was
announced.
And what
then they halt
happened,
sales.
yes, is that they halted the sales, and then when it was re-released, I think the PSF jumped by, I think about 200 PSF. Yeah, so, you know, it really goes to show the MRT effect is not just something that we made up. It's not just something that's in the air. It's a real thing because convenience, because transport is something that people are really looking at.
Yeah.
Right? It's basically your accessibility. How accessible are you to, you know, your work, your friends, and city centre, for example?
Yeah, I think we wrote the article because like that was like before the MRT was announced, and then Chi was just like having a conversation with us or something, and then he was saying that, hey, you know, I studied this for my client, and because he's contemplating between key residences and Normanton Park, and I was telling him to buy key residences because I sort of like think that there's this portion that could be an MRT station, and then like 2 weeks later the MRT was announced. And key residences just like shot up in terms of asking price, right?
That's super awesome because if I were Junwei's client, right, I'll be like, okay, I just bought in, and it's almost like an instant TOP effect, kind of, right? But except it's MRT, and I still get to enjoy that price growth potential. So that's definitely something that you would want to study. You would want to, you look at the URA Master Plan to understand as well. The next question you really want to be asking yourself is, will there be an oversupply? So looking at the URA Master Plan, it's not just about what is around you, but how much of it is going to come up, right? Is it going to be an area where there's just so much competition? You know, we love new launches. We love to advise our clients, you know, buy into areas where there's growth potential. But sometimes there might be a fear that there might be an oversupply. There might be too much competition. So definitely a question to ask is, you know, how many developments will be in this area when my development is built and at a point where I want to sell?
So, of course, one case study will be the very famous Lentor area. Because Lentor is very interesting. It's like existing kind of like bare plot surrounded by a lot of landed properties at this portion, near to Teachers Estate, near to Lentor MRT station, near to basically the Yio Chu Kang zoning. And of course, right behind will be the entire Tagore zoning. So this zone is now recategorized in a sense that it's going to be like a very hype up area, very exciting, because everything is going to be new. there's going to be primarily condominiums, and there's also like right in the middle this fantastic park called Hillock Park, right? So I think there's a few ways to look at it. Number one, like Grayce mentioned, will there be an oversupply? Because there's going to be like 10 plots of new launches that is going to be launched concurrently or maybe in sequential kind of format. So the question to ask is that, should you be the first person to go and buy the first plot? Or should you wait until you are the last person, right? Yeah, what do you think, Grayce?
If I already know I want to buy in this area, then I want to be the first person. Because I know that when all of this come up, definitely there will be competition because I will not be the newest. But my pricing will make sense, right? My pricing will make sense, I guess, vis-a-vis the other projects, because it means that as long as I have a good enough disparity gap, as long as my price is not so close to the next project or it's not that close to the new launch project, then my pricing will make sense in the market. And it also means that all these new launches are going to lead the pricing of my project.
Yeah. So I think one way to look at it is that if you notice 2023, or maybe example in a particular year, there's going to be only like 2 projects that will be launched. And let's say in terms of the tender bid, it's pretty gradual. Like every year, there's like 2 to 3 projects. The next year, 2 to 3 projects. Then you can be quite so-called like assured in the sense that usually for government land sales, the next sequential bid, provided there's no like a strong recession or like a very bad economic outlook or COVID and things like that, most of the time what is going to happen is that the next land bid is going to be slightly higher than the previous one. That has been how land bids has taken place over the past years. But of course, I think there could be a little bit of an alarm mode if you realize that within a year, there's going to be like a lot of land plots that will be activated at the same time. Then you need to be a little bit caution on the particular project to choose, because sometimes when they're launched at the same time, if the price is too similar, what is going to happen 4 years later, if you imagine, is that all these properties are going to TOP together. And if your project in terms of design, layout, overall quantum is subpar to some very nicely branded or like nicely curated developments, because there could be very interesting projects with fantastic facilities or the facade is beautiful, but maybe if you were to buy one that is like a little bit more cookie cutter kind of design, you might lose out to the other one. Yeah, so take note on the launch phase as well as the design. So of course the land tour case study, what will be good is that you also need to notice what has been sold and who has bought the land. Now, one thing about if let's say you notice a number of plots has been bought by the same developer, most of the time the developer will not shoot themselves in the foot. They do not want to have a bad repute. They do not want their buyers to complain 3 to 4 years later. So what is going to happen is that they will, I think from a developer's point of view, they will try their best to differentiate the projects in terms of facade design, layout and things like that, give consumers choices. They will not try to let each project sort of like compete with one another. Yeah. And I think for this entire land tour area, developers actually has to submit their design in terms of to let URA have a look. They want to balance out the whole Hillock Park. They don't want the certain buildings to be too close. That is why some of the projects that has been launched, you notice there's like a cascading effect in terms of the building height as well.
Yeah. I think we are sharing a lot of very like, macro views and macro viewpoints. But at the end of the day, when you are really selecting, not just projects but units, there's a lot to think about beyond just, the growth of the area. Of course, we're sharing from a very macro point of view, right? In terms of, what is the growth, what is the development, how much, who is the developer buying the land plot. But of course, when you are buying or when you're specifically selecting projects, things like architect, things like design are also things to consider. So the land tour area is actually very, very fantastic. It was a great case study because the developers, I guess, they have no choice but to differentiate themselves, right? And they have to introduce these kinds of design elements. So I think there was some very interesting design elements such as, like the wind flow and having the and cascading elements and all that. So these are things that you can consider as well.
Right. So one other thing is to look at how much was the land sold for. So of course, if you go to like certain website tools like HProp. Basically, you'll be able to see that who bought the land. So, for example, the very recent Jalan Tembusu land plot, it was being awarded to Simland. You have an estimated amount of estimated break-even. But of course, this is based on certain parameters. Things will change because there's calculation on land betterment charge. There's calculation on basically different kinds of construction costs, design fees and stuff like that. But at least you get an estimation, and you can add in maybe like a 15-20% kind of margin that developers must have, because if not, it doesn't make sense for developers to do this project in the first place, right? So then you can, from here, add on probably like, if you add 20%, you'll be adding about $380. Then that will end you up to probably about $2,400 per square foot. So you can use this as a rough gauge. But most importantly, there's also another technique. Basically, let's say if you're going for something in the Lentor zoning. Now, one technique is to go with quantum play. Now, what do I mean by that? Is that, for example, if you are going for a two-bedder, try to make sure that if your plan, once it TOP and maybe you want to stay for 2 years, so maybe in about 4 to 6 years' time, you want to exit, what you can do is that, if let's say you want to go for a two-bedder, you want to be the most affordable and easiest to exit two-bedder in future. Because your next buyer, when they come to Lentor, they're going to look at the two-bedders in different projects, and they're going to compare. And certain buyers, and I would say a large majority, they like to look at the overall quantum. Why? Because of TDSR, our quantum has a certain range and limitation, and people loan based on quantum and not based on PSF, right? So they want to look at the quantum of the two-bedder here, two-bedder here, two-bedder here, two-bedder here, and they compare. So if you belong to the highest quantum of two-bedder, because maybe this project, you have a two-bedder that is like super huge, 1,000 square feet. But you have a more efficient two-bedder layout here at about 700 square feet. Then naturally your quantum is going to be lower. But of course, that's a hypothetical example. Nowadays, the two-bedders are all 600 plus 700 square feet. Yeah, so what I'm trying to say is that maybe you might be thinking, should I go for a two-bed or 2+ study? But if a 2+ study quantum is very close to a 3-bed compact, that is also a red flag, because the buyer will be confused in the sense that, should I just top out a little bit to go towards a 3-bedder rather than a 2+ study? Now, what do you think, Grayce?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely what will be going through the buyer's mind. You know, we always, I think we coined this term, the disparity effect, right? Recently, we just got our trademark for it. Disparity effect is basically looking at, you know, if your buyer is like what Melvin mentioned, if they are looking for a two-bedder, but your pricing is too close to a 3-bed compact, then in another project, for example, then you might just lose the buyer to, you know, that 3-bedder. And why we, you know, also classify based on not just, I think just earlier we also talked about different classifications such as the zonings and all that. So let's say if your OCR pricing is, for example, too close to the RCR pricing, then you might just lose your buyer to a different zoning. So these are all things to consider. The disparity effect is basically this kind of mental model that we use to think about how to make decisions that will allow us to exit in the future. All right, so really interesting webinar episode today where we looked at 7 analytical factors that actually affect your property price appreciation. So what we have done here at PLB is we have actually developed a tool. We put all of this into one kind of tech tool. So what is that? Okay, looking at the tools, I think we've already deep dive into it. You know, your master plan transformation to parents attraction effect, MRT effect, rental demand, volume effect, whether you will have an exit audience depending on, you know, your quantum, your PSF, and entering at the right entry price. You know, right entry price is contingent on looking at what else is going to be introduced in the area. Am I buying at too high a price? So looking at all of these 7 analytical factors, what our PLB in-house tech team has actually done is something fantastic. I love this Moat analysis tool as well as our copyrighted disparity effect. So our Moat analysis tool actually allows you to, let me deep dive into it here. list out certain properties, and it actually gives you a scoring based on the factors that we have mentioned, that based on our past, accumulated of 16 years kind of experience, we know that these are the factors that will affect your property pricing when you want to exit in the future. So of course, we have put everything into this kind of Moat analysis. If you're comparing between project A, B, C, you can just contact a PRB consultant, let them know, these are the properties that you would like to analyze using our Moat analysis model. It's how we study properties for our clients as well. There's a scoring that is given to each of the factors in the Moat analysis, and this will help you make a better decision. Now, of course, a caveat to understand is that, these are just scorings, but it has to be understood within, your own kind of framework for buying your properties, right? So sometimes when we look at, MRT effect, when we look at rental demand, some of these things, the URA Master Plan that we shared today will help you to understand whether there's a potential that this scoring could increase in the near future. And then when we look at our disparity effect, now what is the disparity effect? Is really to discover properties with untapped potential, right? So when we look at the disparity effect, we know that every type of property has its own season for price appreciation. And what is the property that if you were to buy in now, you could probably capitalize and ride on this appreciation? That's something that the disparity effect will actually let us know. Now, if you are curious about the URA Master Plan, you are looking at comparing between certain projects, and you want to come and speak to our PRB consultants, here are the signature strategies that have been tried and tested, and we will actually employ them in terms of our consultation sessions. So we will look at these different models that we have used to help many clients identify what is their next investment opportunity, with the empathy to understand that when you select a home, it's also likely for own stay as well.
All right, so we have come to the end of our webinar number 14. Thank you for staying tuned with us all the way on a weekday evening. I think it's great to always receive your comments and feedback. Thank you for joining us on this weekday evening. Take care. Bye.